If you stand in the middle of a cornfield in Iowa in late November, the silence is absolute. The wind cuts across the plains, rattling the dry stalks, carrying with it the scent of frost and earth. But if you walk half a mile down the gravel road, towards the low-slung, corrugated metal structures that interrupt the horizon, the silence breaks. It is replaced by a sound that is felt as much as it is heard. A low, mechanical thrumming. Ventilation fans the size of jet engines spinning tirelessly. And beneath that drone, if you listen closely, you can hear the breathing. The collective, humid breath of 5,000 lives packed into the dark. This is the modern cathedral of protein. It is a marvel of efficiency, a triumph of logistics, and a fortress of secrecy. To the average consumer pushing a cart through a brightly lit supermarket aisle, the connection to this place is severed. We see the bacon, the ham, the ribs, clean, plastic-wrapped, geometric. We do not see the friction in the machine. But inside these walls, and on the trucks that depart from them, there is a statistical inevitability, a byproduct of the system that the industry accounts for in ledgers, but hides from the public eye. They are called downers. In the sanitized language of agricultural regulations, they are non-ambulatory disabled livestock. Animals that, due to injury, exhaustion, disease, or genetic failure, can no longer stand or walk. To the compassionate observer, they are suffering creatures in need of immediate mercy. To the industry, they are a logistical problem, a unit of inventory that has stalled on the assembly line. This is the story of those animals. It is a story that requires us to look past the dinner plate and into the wet, concrete reality of the kill floor. It is a story of how we engineered an animal to fail, and how a hidden war was fought to keep that failure out of sight. To understand the downer pig, you have to go back to the blueprint. The pig of the 1950s was a very different animal from the pig of today. It was a creature of lard and resilience. It had heavy bones, a thick layer of fat to protect it from the cold, and a cardiovascular system designed for foraging, rooting, and roaming. It was an animal built by evolution to survive. But the market didn't want survival. The market wanted lean meat. In the 1980s and 90s, responding to the war on fat and the consumer demand for the other white meat, geneticists went to work. They treated the pig not as an organism, but as a clay sculpture to be reshaped. Through intensive selective breeding, the industry achieved a biological miracle. They created pigs that grew faster than ever before, converting grain into muscle with terrifying efficiency. They lengthened the loin, expanded the ham, and stripped away the back fat. But in this pursuit of the perfect pork chop, they forgot the engine. Veterinarians began to notice a disturbing trend. These new, hypermuscular pigs were fragile. Their hearts were undersized relative to their body mass. Their skeletons were often too light to support the rapid weight gain. It was, as one expert described it, like putting a Ferrari engine inside a go-kart chassis. The structure simply couldn't handle the torque. This genetic manipulation birthed a condition known as porcine stress syndrome, PSS. It is a genetic defect often linked to the very genes that produce lean muscle. In a PSS-positive pig, stress, any stress, triggers a catastrophic physiological chain reaction. A loud noise, a sudden temperature change, the jostling of a truck. When these triggers occur, the pig's metabolism goes haywire. Calcium floods the muscle cells. Lactic acid builds up instantly. Their body temperature skyrockets, essentially cooking them from the inside out. Their muscles become rigid. They tremble. Their skin becomes blotchy. And then, their legs give out. They go down. And once a 250-pound market hog goes down on a slick concrete floor, it rarely gets back up. For decades, this was just considered the cost of doing business. If a farmer lost 1% of his herd to transport stress, it was a tax write-off. But as the scale of farming grew from family operations to massive concentrated animal feeding operations, CAFOs, that 1% became millions of animals. Millions of sentient beings, fully conscious, trapped in bodies that had betrayed them, lying on the floor of a barn or a truck, waiting for a mercy that often came in the form of a boot or an electric prod. The transition from the farm to the slaughterhouse is the most dangerous time in a pig's life. It is the first time they leave the pen they were born in. It is the first time they see sunlight, feel wind, or encounter the chaos of the outside world. For an animal bred in a sterile, low-stimulus environment, the The sensory overload is paralyzing. Imagine the scene. It is 3 a.m. A transport truck, a double-decker aluminum modification, backs up to the loading ramp. The air is filled with the shouts of handlers and the clanging of metal gates. The pigs are moved in groups. They are frightened. They pile up on each other. The handlers are under pressure. The clock is ticking. The truck driver is paid by the load, not by the hour. Speed is the only currency that matters. Electric prods buzz. Plastic paddles slap against flesh. The pigs are forced up the steep ramp into the trailer. For a pig with weak joints or early onset arthritis, common in these heavy, fast-growing breeds, the ramp is a mountain. They slip. They panic. A leg snaps. A hip dislocates. Once inside, the conditions are brutal. In the summer, the metal trailer becomes an oven. Temperatures can reach 100 degrees Fahrenheit inside the stationary vehicle. Pigs do not sweat. They have no way to cool down. They pant, their mouths frothing, their hearts hammering against their ribs. In the winter, the metal is like ice. The wind chill at 60 miles per hour freezes their skin. It is during this journey, which can last for 24 hours without food, water, or rest, that the downers are created. A pig that walked onto the truck at the farm might be unable to stand by the time it reaches the processing plant. It has been trampled by others. It has succumbed to heat exhaustion. It has suffered a heart attack from the stress. When the truck arrives at the slaughterhouse, the healthy pigs are unloaded. They trot down the ramp, driven towards the stunner. But then, the driver checks the back of the truck. In the shadows, lying in the muck of sawdust and feces, are the remainders. The ones who didn't make the cut. This is the moment of truth. This is where the system reveals its true nature. Federal law prohibits the processing of cattle that cannot walk, a regulation born from the mad cow disease scares. But for years, the rules for pigs were different. A downer pig was still money. It was still bacon. It was still sausage. The only requirement was that it had to be alive when it entered the slaughter facility. So, how do you move a 250-pound animal that cannot walk, refuses to move, and is dead weight? You don't ask nicely. In 2008, the veil of secrecy was pierced. Not by a government inspector, but by a person with a hidden camera. Let's call him the operative. He was working for the Humane Society of the United States. He took a job at the Westland/Hallmark Meat Packing Company in Chino, California. It was a major supplier to the National School Lunch Program. It was supposed to be a model facility. For weeks, the operative arrived at work before dawn, donning the white coat and hard hat of a slaughterhouse worker. But inside his buttonhole was a lens the size of a pinhead. A wire ran down his chest to a battery pack taped to his stomach. Every day, he walked into the unloading area, the dark zone where the trucks discharged their cargo. What he captured on video would become the Zapruder film of animal agriculture. The footage was grainy, greenish, and shaking, but the content was unmistakable. It showed workers struggling to move downer cows, though the tactics applied universally to downer livestock. Because the animals had to be alive to be slaughtered, the workers could not simply drag a carcass. They had to stimulate movement. The camera recorded workers using forklifts to scoop up living, breathing animals and ram them forward along the concrete. It captured the sound of electric prods being used continuously on the faces and eyes of animals that were physically incapable of rising. It showed high-pressure water hoses being sprayed into the nostrils of downers to simulate drowning, forcing them to lurch forward in a panic. It was a torture chamber disguised as a loading dock. The operative later described the atmosphere in his field notes. The smell of fear is distinct. It's metallic. It mixes with the rust and the blood. You see the eyes of the animals. They aren't aggressive. They are bewildered. They are in pain. And the men working on them, they aren't monsters, they are desensitized. They have a quota. The foreman is yelling. The line cannot stop. If the line stops, the company loses thousands of dollars a minute. So empathy dies. Efficiency takes over. When this footage was released to the public, the reaction was visceral. It led to the largest meat recall in U.S. history, 143 million pounds of beef. But the shockwave went further. It exposed a gaping loophole in the treatment of all downer animals, including pigs. It forced the public to ask a question they had never considered. If that is what happens to the animal, what is happening to the meat? The cruelty was the headline, but the biology was the ticking time bomb. Dr. Michael Greger, a physician and public health expert, began analyzing the data surrounding downer pigs. He found that a non-ambulatory animal is not just a welfare issue. It is a food safety hazard of the highest order. Think about why the animal is down, Dr. Greger explained in a lecture shortly after the scandal. Is it just a broken leg? Maybe. But often, it is an infection. It is a systemic failure. Downer pigs have weaker immune systems. They are wallowing in the feces of the transport truck. Their stress levels have skyrocketed, which actually causes their gut lining to become more permeable, allowing bacteria to migrate from the intestines into the bloodstream and the meat. Studies confirmed that downer pigs were significantly more likely to carry Salmonella, Campylobacter, and Yersinia enterocolytica. They were carriers of MRSA, methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. When these animals are dragged onto the kill floor, they are often covered in filth. The processing lines move at breakneck speeds, up to 1,100 hogs per hour in some plants. At that speed, removing every speck of contamination is impossible. If a downer pig is slaughtered, its meat doesn't go into the premium cuts. You won't see a downer pork chop at the butcher counter. No, this meat is destined for the grinders. It is mixed with the meat of thousands of other animals to create ground pork, sausages, hot dogs, and pepperoni. This is the mechanism of contamination. One sick animal, ground up and mixed into a batch of 10 tons of sausage, can contaminate the entire lot. The industry argued that cooking kills the bacteria. Cook your pork to 145 degrees, they said. But this placed the burden of safety on the consumer, while the industry continued to push sick animals into the supply chain. The investigators realized that the only way to ensure safety was to ban the slaughter of downer animals entirely. If a pig couldn't walk, it shouldn't be eaten. It should be euthanized, humanely and immediately. It seemed like common sense. It seemed like a moral baseline. But as the advocates would soon find out, common sense is no match for corporate jurisprudence. Following the Westland/Hallmark scandal, the state of California took a bold step. In 2008, voters passed Proposition 2, and the legislature strengthened the penal code to ban the slaughter of non-ambulatory animals and require their immediate euthanasia. It was a landmark victory. For a moment, it seemed that the era of the downer was over. But the National Meat Association, NMA, a trade group representing packers and processors, did not see it as a victory. They saw it as an unconstitutional infringement on their business. They saw it as a slippery slope. If states could ban downer pigs today, what would they ban tomorrow? Crates, antibiotics, the entire industrial model? The NMA sued. Their argument was technical, dry, and devastatingly effective. They pointed to the Federal Meat Inspection Act, FMIA. They argued that federal law preempts state law. The FMIA dictates how inspection happens. The NMA lawyers argued that by banning the slaughter of downers, California was effectively creating its own inspection standard, which it had no right to do. The case wound its way through the lower courts, with mixed results, until it reached the highest court in the land. National Meat Association versus Harris. On a cold day in 2012, the Supreme Court of the United States heard the arguments. On one side, the Attorney General of California and animal protection groups, arguing for the state's right to prevent cruelty and protect public health. On the other side, the meat industry, arguing for the uniformity of federal regulation and the flow of commerce. The industry's lawyers stood before the justices and argued, in essence, that a pig's inability to walk was a condition to be inspected by a federal agent, not a death sentence mandated by a state legislature. They argued that a downer pig might just be tired. It might just have a sore foot. Why waste a perfectly good commodity? The decision was unanimous. 9-0. The Supreme Court sided with the meat industry. Justice Elena Kagan wrote the opinion. She stated that the Federal Meat Inspection Act indeed preempted the California law. The ruling was a shock to the animal welfare community. It meant that states were powerless to ban the slaughter of downer animals if the federal government didn't agree to it. The industry had won the legal battle. They had secured their right to drag downer pigs into the slaughterhouse. But in doing so, they had lost something else. They had lost the ability to claim ignorance. The court case had put the practice on the public record. The arguments were no longer hidden in boardrooms. They were in the transcripts of the Supreme Court. The public now knew that the industry fought, all the way to the Supreme Court, for the right to slaughter pigs that could not walk. The camera often focuses on the animal, the pig thrashing on the floor, the cow being dragged by a chain. But in the shadow of the slaughterhouse, there is another victim, one whose suffering is inextricably linked to the downer, the human being. To understand the reality of processing downer pigs, you must look at the hands that do the work. The meatpacking industry relies heavily on a vulnerable workforce, often immigrants, refugees, and people living on the margins of the economy. They work in environments that are cold, wet, loud, and incredibly dangerous. Moving a downer is not just a logistical challenge, it is a physical hazard. A market-weight hog can weigh 280 pounds. A sow can weigh over 500. When that animal is dead weight, panicked, and thrashing, the physics of moving it are brutal. Occupational safety data reveals a grim pattern. Workers suffer debilitating back injuries, hernias, and crushed limbs attempting to manipulate these animals. But beyond the physical, there is the psychological. Psychologists call it perpetration-induced traumatic stress, PITS. It is a form of PTSD that affects those who are compelled to inflict violence as part of their job. Imagine a worker tasked with keeping the line moving at all costs. His supervisor is screaming because the line has stopped for a downer. The worker has seconds to solve the problem. He cannot be gentle. He cannot be patient. He must use the prod. He must use the boot. He must suppress his own empathy to survive the shift. Over time, this necessity calluses the soul. The system doesn't just break the bodies of the animals, it fractures the minds of the men and women forced to process them. The downer pig becomes a symbol of their own entrapment, stuck in a system where compassion is a fireable offense. In the years following the Supreme Court decision, the industry did not slow down. It accelerated. In 2019, under the guise of modernization, the USDA finalized a new rule, the New Swine Slaughter Inspection System, NSIS. The technical language concealed a radical deregulation. For decades, there were caps on how fast the slaughter line could move. The new rule revoked those speed limits. Previously, lines were capped at roughly 1,100 hogs per hour. Under the new system, plants could run as fast as their machinery allowed. Some lines began to blur the visual field, processing nearly 1,300 animals every 60 minutes. That is one death every 2.7 seconds. At this velocity, the downer problem becomes a catastrophe. When a line is moving that fast, there is zero margin for error. If a pig collapses in the stun chute, it creates a bottleneck. In the old days, a federal inspector might have halted the line to assess the animal. But the new rules also reduced the number of federal inspectors on the line, replacing them with company employees. The fox was now guarding the henhouse. Whistleblowers from inside these high-speed plants began to speak out. They described a chaotic environment where self-inspection was a farce. They reported that because the lines were moving so fast, it was impossible to properly check for consciousness. They described pigs that were stunned improperly, waking up while hanging upside down on the shackle line, thrashing as they were dipped into the scalding tanks of boiling water designed to remove hair. The downer pig, in this high-speed context, is an obstacle to be cleared, not a life to be evaluated. The pressure to simply drag, push, or shove the animal through the system increased tenfold. The deregulation that was promised to improve efficiency had, in effect, weaponized speed against the most vulnerable animals in the facility. Yet, for every action, there is a reaction. The Supreme Court may have sided with the industry, and the regulators may have unleashed the line speeds, but the consumer was waking up. The release of the undercover videos had started a fire that could not be extinguished by a gavel. The concept of social license began to erode. Major corporations, McDonald's, Costco, Walmart, realized that their brands were fragile. They could not afford to be associated with images of pigs being tortured with forklifts. A quiet resistance began to form, not in the legislatures, but in the boardrooms. Retailers began to demand animal welfare audits that exceeded federal law. They started pressing suppliers to phase out gestation crates, the metal cages that confine mother pigs for their entire lives, often leading to the muscle atrophy that creates downers in the first place. Technological eyes multiplied. It wasn't just activists with hidden cameras anymore. Drones began flying over CAFOs, documenting the massive lagoons of pink, toxic waste. The narrative was shifting. The downer pig was no longer just a production error. It was becoming a symbol of a broken relationship with nature. We also saw the rise of the AG gag laws, attempts by states to criminalize the act of filming on farms. But these laws backfired. They signaled to the public that the industry had something to hide. Every time a state tried to ban cameras, the public asked, why? What is happening in there that is so terrible we can't see it? The silence of the industry became its own indictment. We stand now at a crossroads. The system of industrial animal agriculture has reached its biological limit. We have engineered the pig to the point of structural failure. We have accelerated the slaughter line to the limit of human reaction time. We have extracted every ounce of efficiency from flesh and bone. But a new horizon is visible. In sterile labs in California, Israel, and Singapore, a different kind of production is taking root. Cellular agriculture. Cultivated meat. The ability to grow pork from a single cell, without the brain, without the nervous system, without the suffering. For the downer pig, this technology comes too late. But for the future of food, it poses a profound question. If we can create the meat without the misery, does the industrial slaughterhouse become obsolete? Until that day comes, the reality remains on the concrete floor. The downer is still there. Right now, as you listen to this, in a facility somewhere in the Midwest, a pig is collapsing. Its legs are splaying out on the wet floor. It is looking up at the fluorescent lights, hearing the grinding of the chains. It is terrified. It is in pain. The story of the downer pig is not a pleasant one. It is not a story we want to think about when we sit down to breakfast. It is easier to believe in the pastoral fantasy, the red barn, the green grass, the happy animal. But truth is the only disinfectant. The downer is the ghost in the machine. It is the evidence that living beings are not widgets. They are biological entities with limits, with nerves, and with an enormous capacity for suffering. The dark secret is no longer a secret. We know. We have seen the footage. We have read the court documents. We know that the cheap price of pork is subsidized by a hidden tax, a tax paid in cruelty, in environmental degradation, and in the erosion of our own empathy. The industry will continue to argue for efficiency. The laws will lag behind the moral curve. But the ultimate power lies with the witness. To look. To not look away. To acknowledge that the creature on the floor was not a unit of production, but a life that deserved, at the very least, a dignified end. The silence of the farm is gone. The noise is here. And it is up to us to decide what we do with what we hear.